2.6 is solving absolute value equations. So solving absolute value equations. And a lot of this is just going to be what you were doing before. You do the order of operations backwards, and you do the inverse operation to move something to the other side. But I'm going to start with Roman numeral 1 and say solving with, and then just do a couple of those like absolute value lines. I'm going to start out, before we start throwing in x's and all that stuff, I want to ask this question. So if I have absolute value of something, I'm just going to leave it blank for now, equals 7. And want to pose a question, what could be inside that absolute value sign? So one number would be 7. So do you agree we could have a 7? Or the other thing that could be in there would be? Yeah, very nice, you two. So it could be absolute value of 7, stays positive, gives you 7. Or it could be absolute value of negative 7, gives you the 7, right? That's how we get the two answers, that if you were to now kind of replace that with an x and say, okay, absolute value of x equals a number, as long as that number doesn't equal 0, so if you have absolute value of x equals a number and the number's not 0, you're going to get two values for x. So I'll maybe say absolute value of x equals a number gives two possible x values unless the number is 0. Because if you had absolute value of x equals 0, the only one possible answer would be 0. Yep, that if you had, I wouldn't write this, but if you had this here equaling 0, then x has to be 0. You know, there is no negative 0 that you can make positive, it's just that one number. All right, so for these, I'm a linear thinker, so I like seeing the steps. So I'm just going to say, so steps, and with this, I'm going to say, first of all, isolate the absolute value. So isolate the absolute value. So in other words, if we have this absolute value in the middle of a big problem, absolute value of 3x plus 7, minus 5 equals 14, we need to get rid of that minus 5. So all we have on one side is the absolute value. Then step 2 will make more sense in a second. I'm going to say rewrite. So rewrite as two possible cases. So we're going to take our one equation and kind of split it into two different equations, one for each answer. And then 3 is just solve both cases. So solve both cases. So it's a good thing you guys love these solving for variable problems, because now we're doing problems where your one problem becomes two problems. You get like a bonus problem to work on. Woohoo! Life is good. All right, so our first example, I'm going to start a little bit more loving and kind to say absolute value of x plus 2 equals 9. So absolute value of x plus 2 equals 9. So first thing we want to do is just get the absolute value by itself. What do we do to both sides to get absolute value by itself? Yep, so we minus 2 to both sides. That'll move my 2 to the other side. And I'm left with absolute value of x equals 7. Agreed? Now this is the point where we can take and split this into two problems, because we know x could be, so x could be a negative 7. Agreed? If I took and put a negative 7 in right there, it'd give me positive 7 for an answer. Or x could be a positive 7. Because if I took a positive 7 and put it in right there, absolute value of positive 7 is 7. Good? So we're actually done. We don't have to do the solve both cases, step 3, because it's already solved for x. So we know then in my original equation, this thing up here, we could put a 7 right here, and it would give me a 9 for an answer, or we could put in a negative 7 for x. Decent for that? It gets a little bit more challenging if we try to like throw other things in there. You'll notice that x is all alone inside the absolute value. That's when you get like 7 for an answer and negative 7. If x was all alone inside the absolute value and one answer was 5, then the other answer has to be negative 5. Now, if we have more than just an x inside the absolute value, that's going to be where you get two totally different numbers, not just like a number and its opposite. So I'm going to write this for a problem. So my second example, I have 5 times the absolute value of x minus 2 equals 20. So first step is we isolate my absolute value. To do that, I Perfect. So it's 5 times that. So just like we've been doing, we'll do the inverse of multiplication. We'll divide. Now I have the absolute value of x minus 2 equals 4. We're all still together? So now absolute value is isolated, so this is where we can take and break it into two problems. And we could say, all right, x minus 2. What is one number that x minus 2 could be to give me the 4? X minus 2 could be a 4. Agreed? The other option is inside that absolute value, x minus 2 could equal negative 4.
So you basically take the number that equals and then just do one as the normal problem, the other is just negative.
Yeah, exactly. Because if this equals 4, the only options in here for actual numbers would be like this could be a positive 4 or a negative 4. So you're right on. Other questions before we do the last step? And last step then is to get x by itself, we would add 2. So this one on the left becomes x equals 6. Or my other option, if I add 2 to both sides, x could be negative 2. Yeah, because it's starting negative, negative 4, you add 2, you go 2 right on the number line. So x could be 6, or x could be negative 2. Those are the two things we could put in for x in the original problem and still get the 20 for the answer. Roman numeral 2, so special cases. Here's my two special cases. If you have something where the absolute value of something equals 0. So it could be absolute value of 3x, absolute value of x, absolute value of x plus 7. If you have that there, when you go to split it up, I wouldn't write this yet, but if you go to split it up, do you agree it's going to be whatever's inside equals 0 or whatever's inside equals 0? So how many solutions do you end up getting? 1, because they just both equal 0. So this here you're going to get one solution, kind of no matter what's in there. I could quick show an example, and you could choose to not copy this if you're like, I totally have this down. You could quick copy it if you think it'd be good for you. Say absolute value of x minus 1 plus 2 equals 2. So first step would be to subtract 2 from both sides. Agreed? So you have absolute value of x minus 1 equals 0. And now if you broke this up, you'd have x minus 1 equals 0, or x minus 1 equals 0. So plus 1, plus 1, plus 1 over here. So x equals 1, or x equals 1. So you just get one answer when you solve both of them. Is that okay to just quick whip through it super fast? You see I get the same answer? So that's going to be one special case. So if you have an absolute value of something equals 0, you get one solution. My second special case, so number 2, is if you have the absolute value of something, and inside there you could have a 3x. You could have an x plus 2 and x minus 5, a 3x minus 5. If absolute value of something equals a negative number of solutions would be?
None.
None. So this here you get 0 solutions. You get no solutions. And you could go through and work the whole problem if you wanted to, but I'll try to real fast throw down an example. So I have a x minus 1 plus 5 equals 3. So first step is to subtract 5 from both sides, and you get absolute value of x minus 1 equals negative 2. So now when you go to take and break this thing up, you have, all right, I'm going to say x minus 1, what in here, because this has to equal, what in here could give me a negative 2? Well, if you do absolute value of something, you always get a positive. So there is no number that x minus 1 could equal that would give you that negative 2 for an answer. So when you get here to break it up, you're kind of stuck. There's nothing you can do, and that's how you know that it's going to be the 0 solutions. Any questions?